The message came through at 3:47 hours, Standard Earth Time. Captain Eliza Chen was halfway through her coffee when the alert pinged across the command deck of the ESS Vigilant. A single, unintelligible burst of data, broadcast on frequencies that hadn't been used since first contact 50 years ago. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, fingers flying across the holographic interface. "We're picking up something strange. I think it's Zar'xian." The command deck fell silent. The Zar'xians hadn't made contact in nearly 2 decades. Not since the Treaty of Proxima Centauri, when they'd agreed to withdraw beyond the Oort cloud and leave humanity to its own devices. Chen set down her coffee mug with deliberate care. "Put it through, Lieutenant." A series of clicks and whistles filled the bridge, interspersed with what sounded like metallic scraping. The universal translator struggled for several seconds before finally producing coherent words. "Final report of Scout Fleet Gamma 9. Humans have exceeded predictions. Withdrawal no longer strategic. The awakening approaches. All vessels return to Point Omega for final directives." Repeat. "This is the final report of Scout Fleet Gamma 9. The message looped 3 times before cutting off abruptly. Chen stared at the view screen, her expression unreadable. Location. Signal originated from the Kuiper Belt, ma'am. Near Pluto's orbit. Alert command. I want every ship in the sector on high alert, and I want to know what the awakening means." "Yes, Mom." As the crew rushed to comply, Chen found herself drawn to the observation port. The stars looked the same as they always had, cold, distant, indifferent. But for the first time in her 30-year career, they seemed to hold a new menace. Dr. Thomas Rivera had been analyzing the Zar'xian language for most of his adult life. At 62, he was Earth's foremost expert on the aliens' unique method of communication, a complex system of vocalizations, electromagnetic pulses, and pheromones that humans could only partially comprehend, even with the most advanced technology. When the call came from Space Command at 4 in the morning, he knew it wasn't a social invitation. "They said what?" he asked, blinking sleep from his eyes as he stared at Admiral Huang's grim face on his view screen. "The awakening approaches," Huang repeated. "Does that mean anything to you, Doctor?" Rivera ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair. "Not specifically, no. But there's something. Give me a moment." He pulled up his research database, fingers trembling slightly as he navigated through thousands of translated Zar'xian communications. "Here," he said finally. "In their creation myths, there's reference to an ancient force they call the Sleeper in the Void. According to their beliefs, this entity, or entities, will someday awaken and, well, the translation gets murky, but essentially bring about the end and rebirth of all things. You're telling me they believe in some kind of cosmic apocalypse? It's more complex than that, Admiral. The Zar'xians don't think in linear terms like we do. For them, endings and beginnings are part of the same process. But what concerns me is this mention of humans exceeding predictions. The Zar'xians have always considered us unpredictable, dangerous even, but this suggests something more." Wang's expression darkened. Could they be planning an attack? Possible, but not necessarily. The Zar'xians aren't conquerors, they're observers. They watch, they analyze, they report back to whoever they report to. We've never actually figured that part out. Well, they're reporting something now, and I don't like the sound of it. We're assembling a task force. I need you on the next shuttle to Luna Command." Rivera nodded, already calculating what he would need to bring. "I'll be ready in an hour." As the Admiral signed off, Rivera turned to the window of his Colorado home. The first light of dawn was just beginning to illuminate the Rockies. He wondered how many more sunrises humanity would witness. 3 days later, at Luna Command, the situation had deteriorated rapidly. "They're moving," General Sarah Walker announced to the assembled military and scientific leaders. The holographic display showed hundreds of Zar'xian vessels converging from the outer reaches of the solar system. Not toward Earth, but toward the sun. That makes no tactical sense, someone muttered. Rivera studied the display, noting the precise formation of the alien craft. It might if they're not planning conventional warfare. All eyes turned to him. The Zar'xians have technology we barely understand, he continued. They can manipulate gravity, possibly even space-time itself. If they're heading toward the sun, it's for a specific purpose. Such as? Walker demanded. I don't know, Rivera admitted. But in their mythology, stars aren't just balls of fusing hydrogen. They're nodes in some kind of cosmic network. Pressure points, if you will. A young lieutenant rushed into the room, interrupting the discussion. General, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations from the Zar'xian fleet. And there's something else. We're receiving transmissions from all over the galaxy. Non-human in origin, but definitely not Zar'xian either. The room erupted into chaos. Quiet, Walker shouted, restoring order. What kind of transmissions? Unknown, ma'am. But they're all converging on our system, specifically our sun. Rivera felt his blood run cold. They're responding to the call, he whispered. The awakening. The general fixed him with a steely gaze. Doctor, I need more than vague mythological references. What exactly are we facing here? Before Rivera could respond, the room plunged into darkness. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everyone in eerie red light. What now? Walker snapped. Ma'am. The lieutenant's voice shook slightly. Every observatory in the system is reporting the same thing. The sun, it's changing. The holographic display flickered back to life, showing a live feed from the Solar Dynamics Observatory. The sun's surface was rippling, its familiar yellow-orange glow giving way to patterns of deep blue and violet that no human had ever seen before. My God, someone whispered. Get me Captain Chen, Walker ordered. The Vigilant is closest to the Zar'xian fleet. I want eyes on what they're doing. As communications officers scrambled to comply, Rivera couldn't tear his gaze from the transformed sun. In all his years studying the Zar'xians, he'd never truly understood their ultimate purpose. Now, watching the heart of Earth's solar system pulsate with alien energies, he wondered if humanity had been asking the wrong questions all along. The Zar'xians weren't the threat. They were just the harbingers. And whatever they had awakened was now turning its attention to Earth. The connection to the ESS Vigilant crackled with static. Captain Chen's face appeared on the main display, her features taut with tension. General, we've positioned ourselves at the outer edge of the Zar'xian formation. They're not responding to any of our hails. Can you see what they're doing? Walker demanded. Chen nodded grimly. They've arranged themselves in some kind of geometric pattern around the sun. Each vessel is emitting a beam of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like they're pulling at the fabric of space itself. Rivera moved closer to the screen, studying the footage being transmitted from the Vigilant. The Zar'xian ships, sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to shift and flow rather than maintain a fixed shape, were indeed positioned in a perfect dodecahedron around the sun. From each vessel, a tendril of darkness stretched toward the star, not like a physical beam, but more like a tear in reality. Those aren't weapons, Rivera said quietly. They're keys. Walker turned to him, eyebrows raised. Explain. In the limited communications we've had with the Zar'xians over the decades, they occasionally referred to themselves as keepers of the ways. I always assumed it was some kind of philosophical or religious title. But what if it's literal? What if they're literally keeping something contained? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. And now they're unlocking it, Walker said, her voice barely above a whisper. The lieutenant monitoring communications suddenly straightened in his chair. General, we're receiving a direct transmission from the Zar'xian fleet. It's addressed specifically to Dr. Rivera. All eyes turned to the linguist, who looked as surprised as anyone else. Put it through, Walker ordered after a moment's hesitation. The main screen split, showing Captain Chen on one side and a swirling mass of blue-gray mist on the other. Slowly, the mist coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape, the closest the Zar'xians ever came to presenting themselves in a form humans could relate to. Thomas Rivera, observer, came the strange, multi-toned voice, somehow both mechanical and organic. The cycle reaches completion. The simulation concludes. You alone among humans have glimpsed the pattern. Rivera stepped forward, heart pounding. What pattern? What simulation? Existence. The Zar'xian replied simply. The experiment that your kind calls reality. It was seeded billions of your years ago, when the sleeper withdrew consciousness from this sector to dream new forms of being. We were assigned to monitor its development. You're saying our entire universe is some kind of experiment? Walker interjected, disbelief evident in her voice. The Zar'xian's form rippled slightly. Not experiment. Gestation. The awakening approaches because humanity has achieved critical complexity. You have evolved beyond predicted parameters. The sleeper stirs in response to your collective consciousness. Rivera's mind raced, trying to connect this revelation to everything he knew about Zar'xian culture and language. The myths about the sleeper in the void. They're talking about some kind of cosmic entity that, what? Created our universe. Not created, the Zar'xian corrected. Is. The universe exists within the dreaming mind of the sleeper. And now it wakes. On the other half of the screen, Captain Chen's voice cut through the metaphysical discussion. General, something's happening. The sun, it's collapsing in on itself. The feed from the Vigilant showed the star pulsing violently, its surface rupturing in patterns that seemed to form and reform into complex, fractal shapes. The blue-violet light intensified, casting an unnatural glow throughout the solar system. This is beyond unprecedented. A solar physicist in the room muttered, staring at the readings flooding her tablet. The sun's mass is decreasing, but its energy output is increasing exponentially. It's like it's folding into another dimension. Not folding. The Zar'xian corrected again. Opening. The gateway forms. Gateway to what? Walker demanded. To everywhere. To the mind beyond minds. Thomas Rivera, observer, understands. And strangely, Rivera found that he did understand, at least partially. 20 years ago, he'd written a paper theorizing that the Zar'xian language contained embedded mathematical concepts, suggesting they perceive reality as multidimensional in ways humans couldn't comprehend. His colleagues had dismissed it as speculative nonsense. You're saying our sun is becoming a connection point to whatever this sleeper is? He asked. Yes, the network activates across all star systems where conscious life has emerged. A great joining commences. Chen's voice broke through again, tinged with urgency. General, we're detecting massive gravitational fluctuations. The Vigilant systems are going haywire. And wait, there's something else emerging from the sun. The footage showed what looked like a massive tendril of liquid light extending from the star's surface, reaching out toward the void between planets. Similar tendrils began to appear all around the sun's circumference, twisting and weaving together into what resembled a gigantic neural network. It's beautiful, Chen whispered, momentarily forgetting military protocol. The Zar'xian's form began to dissipate. Our task concludes. We withdraw to observe the final phase. Prepare yourselves, humans. Existence transforms. Wait, Rivera called out. What happens to Earth, to humanity? But the alien was already gone, its image replaced by the increasingly chaotic scene around the sun. The Zar'xian fleet had begun to move away, their purpose apparently fulfilled. In the silence that followed, Walker turned to the room full of Earth's brightest minds and most decorated military leaders. For perhaps the first time in her illustrious career, she looked utterly lost. Recommendations, she finally asked, her voice steady despite everything. A young astrophysicist raised her hand tentatively. General, if what the Zar'xian said is true, if our sun is becoming some kind of interdimensional gateway. Then conventional defense strategies are meaningless. This isn't an invasion we can fight. So what do we do? Just sit back and watch the end of the world. Walker snapped. Rivera had been quiet, his mind processing everything he'd heard and seen. Now he spoke up, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. No, General. We don't watch the end of the world. We witness its transformation. And perhaps, we participate in it. Explain, Walker demanded. The Zar'xian said humanity achieved critical complexity, that our consciousness somehow triggered this awakening. What if that means we have a role to play in whatever comes next? Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the command center. The lieutenant monitoring global communications looked up, his face pale. General, we're receiving reports from around the world. The strange light from the sun. It's having an effect on people. Thousands are reporting unusual experiences, shared visions, spontaneous knowledge of things they couldn't possibly know. And there's more. The lights flickered again, and this time, when they returned, the holographic display showed not just the transformed sun, but something else emerging from its depths. Something vast, ancient, aware, and it was reaching toward Earth. For 3 days, Earth held its collective breath. The phenomenon emerging from the sun continued to grow, extending vast, luminous tendrils that stretched halfway to Mercury's orbit. Scientists struggled to explain what they were seeing in terms of known physics, while religious leaders proclaimed everything from apocalypse to ascension. Throughout it all, Luna Command remained humanity's central nervous system, processing information from across the solar system and attempting to formulate some kind of response. The effects are intensifying, Dr. Kira Yoshida reported, displaying the latest neural scan data. Over 60% of the global population now reports experiencing the shared visions, and they're becoming more coherent. Rivera studied the patterns displayed on the screen. As a linguist, he recognized something profound happening. The visions people described weren't random hallucinations, but pieces of a larger message, a communication attempting to form itself using human minds as conduits. It's trying to speak to us, he said, but our individual brains can only process fragments. General Walker, who hadn't slept in nearly 72 hours, looked up from her tactical display. The question remains, is it a threat? I don't think that's the right framework, Rivera replied. This entity, the sleeper, exists beyond our concepts of threat or ally. It's more like a fundamental shift in the nature of reality itself. The doors to the command center slid open, and Captain Chen entered. She had returned from the Vigilant 12 hours earlier, after the ship had been forced to retreat from the increasing gravitational distortions near the sun. The last of the Zar'xian fleet has moved beyond Neptune's orbit, she reported. They've completed whatever role they had in this. Walker nodded grimly. So we're on our own. Maybe not, Chen said, her expression unreadable. Before we lost contact with the outer observatories, they detected something coming in from deep space. Thousands of objects, moving faster than should be possible, all converging on our solar system. A chill ran through the room. More aliens? Someone asked. Unknown, Chen replied. But they'll reach Earth's orbit within 6 hours. Walker's face hardened. I want every defensive system we have ready to deploy, if this is an invasion taking advantage of our vulnerability. Wait, Rivera interrupted, something clicking in his mind. The Zar'xian said other star systems were experiencing the same transformation. What if these aren't invaders, but refugees, or witnesses? That's one hell of a gamble, Doctor, Walker replied. Before Rivera could respond, the room's lighting flickered again. But this time, the air itself seemed to shimmer, as if reality was becoming thin, permeable. Several people gasped as a strange golden light briefly illuminated every surface, accompanied by a sound just at the edge of human hearing. It's accelerating, Yoshida whispered, staring at her readings. Whatever's happening with the sun, it's reaching some kind of critical point. Rivera felt a pressure building inside his skull. Not painful, but insistent. Around him, others were pressing their hands to their temples, experiencing the same sensation. Only Walker seemed immune, her military discipline holding firm against the intrusion. "Everyone stay focused," she ordered. "We need options, not mystical experiences." Chen stepped forward. "General, with respect, I think we need to consider Dr. Rivera's perspective." The Zar'xians chose to contact him specifically. They said he understood the pattern. All eyes turned to Rivera, who suddenly felt the weight of humanity's fate on his shoulders. The pressure in his mind intensified, and with it came fragments of understanding. Mathematical concepts that shouldn't make sense to him, but somehow did, visions of realities folded within realities, and a profound sense of recognition. "The sun," he said slowly. "It's not just our star anymore. It's becoming a node in a vast network, a connection point between our consciousness and something greater. And I think the choice before us isn't whether to fight or surrender." "Then what is it?" Walker demanded. "Whether to remain separate or to join." At that moment, alarms blared throughout the facility. The holographic display showed the tendrils from the sun suddenly accelerating their growth, reaching toward Earth like curious fingers. At the same time, the mysterious objects from deep space had entered the solar system, resolving into thousands of crystalline vessels, unlike any technology humans had seen before, yet distinctly not Zar'xian. "They're slowing," Chen observed, "taking up positions in orbit around Earth." "Defensive posture?" Walker asked. "No," Chen replied. "More like awaiting formation. They're arranging themselves in a pattern similar to what the Zar'xians formed around the sun." The pressure in Rivera's mind suddenly expanded, becoming not just thoughts or visions, but a presence, vast, ancient, curious, and somehow deeply familiar, as if he was remembering rather than encountering. "It's here," he whispered. The tendrils from the sun made contact with Earth's atmosphere, and the world held its breath at the brink of transformation. The moment the solar tendrils touched Earth's atmosphere, every electronic system on the planet flickered and died. Then, just as suddenly, they reactivated, but different. Displays showing tactical information now revealed complex, fractal patterns that shifted and evolved. Communication systems broadcast not just human voices, but harmonics that seemed to resonate with something deep within the listeners' minds. In Luna Command, the holographic display expanded, showing not just the solar system, but glimpses of other star systems experiencing the same phenomenon. Hundreds of them, thousands, all connected by threads of impossible light stretching across the void. "My God," Chen whispered. "It's happening everywhere." Rivera felt the presence in his mind expand, becoming more distinct, not invading, but inviting. With it came a realization that hit him like a physical blow. "They lied to us," he said, his voice tight with shock. "The Zar'xians, they weren't just observers." Walker turned to him sharply. "Explain." "I'm seeing their history now, their true purpose. They weren't assigned to monitor us. They were placed here to contain us." Rivera's eyes widened as the knowledge continued to flood through him. Humanity wasn't an experiment. We were a quarantine. The command center erupted in confused questions, but Rivera raised his hand for silence, struggling to articulate what he was experiencing. "The sleeper, it's not one entity, but many. A collective consciousness that spans galaxies, formed by thousands of species that reached the same point we're approaching now. The Zar'xians are just one of many sentinel species, tasked with ensuring that newly evolved consciousnesses join the collective only when ready." "Ready for what?" Chen asked. Before Rivera could answer, one of the monitoring stations reported a new development. The unknown vessels in Earth orbit had begun to emit signals, not radio waves, but modulations in the fabric of space-time itself. "They're responding to the tendrils," Yoshida said, analyzing the patterns. "Almost like they're trying to intercept the connection." Then came the twist that none of them had anticipated. The massive view screen showed the Zar'xian fleet, which had appeared to withdraw beyond Neptune, suddenly reappearing near Earth. They had never left, merely cloaked themselves, waiting. "This isn't right," Rivera muttered, his face pale. "They're interfering with the process." Walker's tactical instincts kicked in. Why would they initiate something only to disrupt it? The answer came not from Rivera, but from a new presence that materialized in the center of the command room, a shimmering, translucent figure that resembled a human woman, though composed entirely of light. When she spoke, her voice carried the same multi-toned quality as the Zar'xians, but with a warmth the aliens had lacked. "Because they fear what humanity will become," the figure said. "I am Alia, an emissary of the collective. The Zar'xians told you partial truths. We are indeed awakening, but they omitted a crucial detail. They believe humanity will disrupt the balance we have maintained for eons." The room fell silent, every person present struggling to process this new information. "The Zar'xians are a conservative faction within our greater community," Alia continued. "They value stability above all else. Humanity's rate of development alarmed them, particularly your capacity for both destruction and creation. They fear your species will transform the collective rather than simply joining it." "And would we?" Walker asked, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. The luminous figure seemed to smile. "That is precisely what we have come to discover. The vessels you see are not invaders, but representatives from thousands of worlds that chose to join our shared consciousness. We come not to conquer, but to witness." Rivera felt something shift in the connection forming in his mind, a sense of standing at a precipice, with multiple possible futures branching before them. And he realized with sudden clarity that the choice facing humanity was far more complex than he had first understood. "The Zar'xians aren't trying to prevent our ascension," he said slowly. "They're trying to control it, to ensure we join on their terms, not our own." Outside, the tendrils from the sun pulsed with increasing intensity as the Zar'xian fleet moved to intercept the orbiting vessels of the collective. The battle for humanity's cosmic destiny had begun, and Earth was caught in the middle. Space itself seemed to warp as the Zar'xian vessels engaged with the collective's ships in Earth's orbit. It wasn't combat in any conventional sense, no weapons fire or explosions, but rather a contest of reality manipulation that sent ripples through the fabric of space-time. Each distortion sent fresh waves of visions cascading through the minds of humanity. "They're fighting over the connection," Rivera said, his voice strained as he processed the flood of information streaming through his consciousness. "The Zar'xians are trying to sever our link to the collective while maintaining their own control." General Walker, ever the tactician, turned to Alia. "What happens to Earth if they succeed?" "Limitation," the luminous figure replied. "The Zar'xians would allow humanity to join the greater consciousness, but as subordinates rather than equals. Your unique perspective, your creativity, your unpredictability, would be suppressed for the sake of stability." "And if they fail?" Chen asked. "Choice," Alia said simply. "True choice for humanity to define its own relationship with the collective." Walker's expression hardened. "So we just wait while aliens decide our fate? There must be something we can do." Rivera had been silent, his eyes closed as he navigated the streams of awareness flowing through his mind. Now they snapped open. There is. The connection works both ways. The sleeper is reaching into our minds. Yes, but we can also reach back. "How?" Yoshida asked. "Through synchronization," Rivera said. "If enough humans focus their consciousness in a unified way, we could strengthen the connection beyond the Zar'xians' ability to control it." Alia's form brightened. "Yes, this is the test, not whether you can join, but whether you can choose how you join." Walker didn't hesitate. "Dr. Yoshida, broadcast instructions worldwide. Every available communication channel. Tell people to focus on the connection they're feeling, to embrace it rather than fear it." As Yoshida rushed to comply, the battle above intensified. The Zar'xian fleet began to gain the upper hand, their millennia of experience giving them advantage over the diverse collective forces. The tendrils connecting Earth to the transformed sun began to flicker and fade. "It's working," Rivera gasped. "Humanity is responding. Billions of minds turning toward the connection, strengthening it." On screens around the world, people watched as the solar tendrils that had begun to fade suddenly pulsed with renewed vigor. They expanded, not just connecting to Earth's atmosphere, but enveloping the planet in a gentle, golden glow. The Zar'xian vessels seemed to falter, their formations disrupting as this unexpected surge overwhelmed their efforts. In Luna Command, Rivera staggered as the connection in his mind exploded into full consciousness. He was no longer just receiving fragments, but experiencing the full breadth of the collective. Countless civilizations across the galaxy, each unique yet united in a shared understanding that transcended language. And with that understanding came revelation. "Wait," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "This isn't just happening now. It's always been happening. The sleeper, the collective. They're outside of time as we understand it. This moment, this joining, it echoes backward and forward through history." Alia nodded. "Now you begin to see. The separation was always an illusion. Humanity has been part of the greater consciousness from the beginning. You were just unaware of it." The final piece clicked into place in Rivera's mind. That's why the Zar'xians feared us. Not just for what we might become, but because at some level, they knew we already were more than they understood. Above Earth, the Zar'xian fleet began to withdraw, their attempt to control humanity's ascension thwarted by the sheer force of billions of minds choosing their own path. The collective vessels pulsed with light in what seemed like celebration. Then came the final, unexpected twist. As the connection reached its peak, Rivera saw past the immediate conflict to something that neither the Zar'xians nor Alia had revealed, a pattern so vast it had remained hidden even from them. "General," he said, his voice suddenly urgent, "the awakening isn't just joining an existing collective. It's transforming it. Every species that joins changes the whole. And humanity." He paused, struggling to articulate the immensity of what he was seeing. "We're not just another addition. We're a catalyst." Alia's luminous form flickered, surprise evident even in her transcendent state. "How is this possible?" "Because we were never truly isolated," Rivera said with growing certainty. "The quarantine was imperfect. Earth has been visited throughout its history, influenced in subtle ways. We're not just joining the collective. We're completing a circuit that was designed eons ago." As if in confirmation, the golden glow surrounding Earth intensified, sending pulses of energy not just back to the sun, but outward across the galaxy. The transformation had begun, not just of humanity, but of the very consciousness they were joining. And in that moment, the last report of the Zar'xian scout fleet became not an ending, but a beginning. Days passed as Earth adjusted to its new reality. The golden glow that had enveloped the planet gradually faded, but the connection remained, a subtle, ever-present awareness in the background of human consciousness. Not an intrusion, but an expansion, like discovering a room in your home that had always existed but somehow remained hidden until now. In the observatory atop Luna Command, Rivera stood beside Chen and Walker, gazing at the transformed sun. It still provided light and heat, still anchored the planets in their orbits, but now it shimmered with hints of colors that had no names in human language. "The reports are consistent worldwide," Chen said, reviewing the data on her tablet. "No mass panic, no societal breakdown. People are just adapting." Walker nodded, her military bearing softened somewhat by the events of the past week. "The Zar'xian fleet has withdrawn completely from the solar system. The last of the collective's vessels departed this morning, though Alia says they'll maintain representatives nearby. Not that they need physical presence anymore," Rivera added. The connection in his mind had stabilized, no longer overwhelming but integrated into his awareness, like learning a new sense. "We can reach them whenever we choose, and they us. What happens now? Chen asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Rivera turned from the viewport to face his colleagues. Something unprecedented. We continue to be human, but with access to the accumulated wisdom of thousands of civilizations, and in turn, our perspective enriches the collective. You still haven't fully explained that final revelation, Walker said. How exactly are we a catalyst? Rivera smiled. It turns out that most species that join the collective do so after reaching a point of stability, when they've overcome their internal conflicts and unified their societies. Humanity is different. We're joining while still divided, still evolving, still full of contradictions. And that's a good thing? Chen asked skeptically. It's a necessary thing, Rivera replied. The collective had reached a kind of equilibrium, stable, but stagnant. Our chaotic creativity, our ability to hold opposing ideas simultaneously, our constant questioning. These are like a fresh current in a still pond. We're infusing the collective with something it needs. Walker frowned. Is that why the Zar'xians wanted to control our ascension? To filter out those elements they considered destabilizing? Exactly. They sought to preserve the status quo. But the true purpose of the collective isn't stasis, it's growth. And sometimes growth requires disruption. In the weeks that followed, humanity began to explore its new relationship with the cosmos. Scientists worked alongside artists to develop new languages capable of expressing concepts previously beyond human understanding. Engineers collaborated across continents without need for conventional communication, insights flowing through the connection that united all consciousness. And yet, people remained distinctly human. They still laughed and cried, argued and reconciled, doubted and believed. The connection didn't erase individuality but enhanced it, placing each unique perspective within a greater context. 6 months after what came to be known as the Awakening, Rivera stood on a hillside in Colorado, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Dr. Yoshida joined him, having become a close friend through their shared work understanding humanity's new condition. I received an interesting transmission today, she said, from a species on the far side of the galaxy that just experienced their own awakening. They're asking for our guidance. Rivera raised an eyebrow. Our guidance? We've barely figured this out ourselves. Yoshida smiled. That's exactly why they want to learn from us. Our beginner's mind, as they put it. Rivera laughed, a sound of genuine joy. So we've gone from quarantined subjects to teachers in less than a year. The universe has a sense of humor after all. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rivera felt the connection pulse gently in his mind. Billions of consciousnesses across the galaxy, each unique, each valuable, all part of a greater whole that was still discovering itself. The last report of the Zar'xian scout fleet had warned of humanity's unpredictability. In the end, that warning had proven true, though not in the way they feared. Humanity hadn't disrupted the cosmic order but revitalized it, bringing fresh perspective to ancient awareness. And somewhere in the vast network of consciousness that spanned the galaxy, Rivera sensed the Zar'xians themselves beginning to understand. Not as controllers or sentinels, but as fellow travelers on a journey that had only just begun. The stars above no longer seemed distant and cold, but like old friends seen with new eyes. Earth wasn't alone in the cosmos. It never had been. And whatever challenges lay ahead would be faced not in isolation, but in connection. The future, like the universe itself, was infinite with possibility.